Okay, so this is the sixth generation Toyota HiAce, the vehicle that's dominated the 2.5 to 3.5 tonne mid-size van segment. So it's pretty much its release in 1968, and this is the sixth generation. It's the best one yet for sure. The big change with this one was the old HiAces, you always sat over the engine with the front wheels under the driver. The big change here was to move the wheels and the engine in front of the driver. And that's not only a big improvement in terms of safety, but it also makes it far more conventional in design, more like a car to drive. So it's a much more comfortable vehicle all around. It's got sliding doors on both sides of a pretty big cargo bay. This latest generation is a fraction larger than the old one in terms of load volume. So it's just over 6 cubic meters of load volume, which is pretty sizable, and that's no doubt a result of how square it is. You can see it's a very squared off shape, so it takes maximum advantage of that in terms of giving you a decent load volume. There's only a single lift tailgate on the back. There's no optional barn doors, so if you need to do a lot of forklift loading from the rear, that may be an issue, but it's you can see it's a pretty big cargo bay there, and obviously the single lift tailgate isn't a problem given the very strong sails that this vehicle tends to attract. This has got a special option pack on it, this one too, so you've got body coloured front and rear bumpers, you've got fog lights and a few other little features, so it doesn't quite look like the white good on wheels that some HiAces can look like. They're sliding doors on both sides. It's a very good looking vehicle from a commercial viewpoint, and this latest generation is also larger than its predecessor by a considerable margin, which we'll talk about a bit later on. So that's how it looks. Let's see how it drives. Okay, underway. So the latest HiAce offers two different engines. You can get a 3.5 litre petrol V6, or like our test vehicle, a 2.8 litre 4-cylinder turbo diesel, and it comes standard with a 6-speed manual transmission or the optional 6-speed automatic. This has the auto, and it's a pretty good transmission too. They've done a very good job with the redesign of the HiAce. I remember driving previous models, it was almost sadistic of Toyota to make you drive one of those things if you're at the wheel all day. They were really quite exhausting to drive with that upright position. They're very uncomfortable, very noisy, but this new design has just changed things completely, as I mentioned, with the engine and the wheels in front of the driver now for the first time. It's just far more conventional in design, and therefore it's a far more conventional driving experience. You feel more like you're driving a car than a van, and it really has no vices. I mean, the engine, 450 newton meters of torque. It's got plenty of torque and pulling power, and everything else about it is excellent. The steering feel, the brakes, that's the general handling. Toyota have always made the HiAce with rear-wheel drive, and with this new model they've stuck to it, and that makes sense to me because there are certain advantages to rear-wheel drive, particularly when you're carrying heavy loads, which this is designed to do. If you're in low traction situations, the natural weight transfer in the car goes onto the rear wheel, so I think it's got a big advantage if you're carrying heavy loads over a front-wheel drive configuration in certain situations, particularly when traction is compromised. So they've stuck with rear-wheel drive, still got the McPherson strut front end. It's a big, tough, rugged sort of van. I must say they've done a really nice job with the redesign internally. The dashboard looks terrific. Probably with this two-tone arrangement, this light colour plastic here, it's going to show the dirt more than a dark colour would over time. But it's certainly got a fresh, bold, very airy look to it. It feels nice and open. All the instruments and the controls are easy to read and operate. You can get yourself pretty comfortable in the driver's seat with the decent sized left footrest, which is great. And also the steering is adjustable for height and reach. So by the time you've fiddled around with those things, I think drivers of most sizes can get pretty comfortable in a HiAce. There's a fair amount of noise that comes from the cargo bay, as we find in all vans without a fully sealed bulkhead between the driver's cabin and the cargo bay. You get a lot of noise coming from the tyres through the rear wheel housings, and because there's very minimal amounts of lining in there, the cargo bay acts as like a boom box, like a big echo chamber. And when you get up to speeds of around 100 kilometers an hour on the highway, if you've got a coarse bitumen road, that noise can be pretty enervating over time. So if you're planning on doing a lot of highway work, it's something to consider, because having a fully sealed bulkhead between the driver's cabin and the cargo bay is very important. Although this current 6th generation HiAce is larger than all its predecessors, and that means in every key dimension, it's longer in wheelbase, it's longer overall, it's wider, and it's slightly taller, it certainly doesn't feel that way from behind the steering wheel. It's got a really nice agile feel about it. It certainly doesn't feel overly large or cumbersome. And because the engine has, you know, a healthy amount of torque, 450 Newton meters of torque, it's just where you need it when you're doing a lot of city and suburban driving in that sort of 40 to 80 kilometer an hour range. It's got plenty of throttle response, and we have loaded this up with more than a ton, and it coped with that very admirably, not only the engine but also the suspension. It was well on top of the job. So it's a very competent load carrier. You know, Toyota has a habit of creating benchmark vehicles in different categories, and I would have to say the latest HiAce is continuing that tradition. It's not perfect, it's got a few flaws, but they're only minor, and it would be closer to that perfect judgment than a number of its competitors. So just on the strength of that alone, I would say the HiAce will continue to dominate the 2.5 to 3.5 ton GVM class of mid-size van, because it really, for most buyers, it would tick most of the boxes.